certain types of when they speak to parenting programs and how it's geared, it can be from a maternal perspective. And so, just as anything else, we want to be inclusive in our language when talking about parenting programs and talking about the father's role. Another thing is, what a father believes his role is to be in terms of the family and what is his job. One of the things that we know is fathers historically have been told that the way we care for children is through their financial provision. And so oftentimes men and father believe that, if I'm paying the bills and everything's taken care of financially, then I'm caring for my child. And this isn't necessarily untrue, but we know this is just incomplete. And so fathers don't often value their role and their impact as a nurturer and a caregiver. And there are cultural implications, obviously, regarding this as well, as what is the man, quote unquote, supposed to be doing, what should he be doing, and all of these things. All of these things can be barriers to involvement, specifically regarding whether or not a father may feel emasculated. If he's doing certain things that are considered to be maternal activities, is that emasculating to the father? So these are some typical things that can be barriers and often will need to be addressed. So why do all these things? Is it even worth it to challenge this paradigm? Is it even worth it to kind of just even engage fathers? Do we want to enlighten fathers? What is it even worth it to us? So some of the statistics we know is that fatherless children are
LeHenry, I'm so sorry. LeHenry, I'm so sorry. I'm going to pause you for 1 second. We're hearing a lot of background noise. There's a conversation of someone scheduling their clients. Thank you. Go ahead, LeHenry.
So we want to look at again what's the point of all this. And some statistics that we'll look at first is fatherless children are likely to drop out of school than their classmates who live with two parents. And now one of the things that we want to pay attention to specifically here is that when we're looking at these facts, we're looking at these numbers, this is not custodial relationships. So this isn't necessarily in the home. What we mean by father involvement, what we mean by even two-parent quote-unquote homes is how active is the father involved in that child. So this isn't where the father lives. Okay, I just want to make that point clear. This is nothing to do with the father, where the father lives. This more so is in regards to how active the father is in the life of his child. Because fathers who live in the home, if they're not active in the child's life or in their children's lives, some of their child or their children may fall into these statistics as well. So this really has to do with the level of involvement a father has in the lives of his children. How present is he in their day-to-day lives? So 70% that are non-incarcerated in juvenile corrections in a single-parent environment. Children are 4 times more likely to be poor. 80% of adolescents in psychiatric hospitals come from fatherless homes. And again, we're not talking about residential parenting. We're talking about how more so emotional parenting, how involved the father is. And 62% of youth suicides are from fatherless home, which is 5 times the average. And again, how involved is the father is what we're looking at when we look at these statistics. Some of the things that fathers need to know, specifically when we're talking about, again, prenatally, young children, 24 weeks, babies can hear sounds from the outside, and that includes their voice. A lot of fathers don't have an appreciation for this. And talking to them about, their child will learn their voice and hear their voice. So when he or she is born, the fathers can begin to soothe their child right away because their voice will be familiar as well. The quality and quantity of baby-father contact has a great impact on how secure children feel growing up, level of safety, emotional regulation. Toddlers and young children are likely to be more sociable when starting nursery school. And I also want to say, when we're looking at this research isn't adversarial. And what I mean by that is oftentimes when we think of moms and dads, we think of, we often put a V in the middle as it's mom versus dads. This is not more so than mom and, dad is doing more. This is just how involved the dad is in relationship to his child. Whether or not mom is active or inactive, this does not deal with that in any way. So this is not dad doing more than mom or vice versa. This is just the level of involvement dad has. Babies with strong attachment to their dads have fewer behavior problems later on, um, better language development, better cognition skills in terms of IQ scores among toddlers and young children. Even from birth, um, again, children to be more emotionally secure, confident, um, as they grow older, have better social connections. And so, again, this is critical because a lot of times fathers really don't understand the impact of their involvement and the impact of their lack of involvement at a very young age, even prenatally. A lot of times, fathers just really don't understand what they bring to the table from a nurturing perspective. Um, just some more facts. Active nurturing style in terms of fathers, we're talking about better verbal skills, intellectual functioning, academic achievement. Start school with toddlers start school with higher levels of academic readiness. They're more patient, can handle stress, frustrations. They're more ready to be involved in the school environment. Babies tend to be more secure and confident when they're held and comforted. Oftentimes, fathers have the perception of myth of spoiling a baby. Um, fathers, culturally speaking, can be very concerned, often with their sons, about them being soft or about them being weak or anything like this. Um, so they'll tend less to hold or comfort their babies, maybe not as much as their co-parent will. And we want to really again enlighten our fathers to the impact of them holding and comforting their children, and that you really can't spoil a baby, and just really enlightening the fathers to these things. Um, Behavior problems, delinquency, depression, substance abuse, psychological adjustment are all more closely lined up to dad's rejection as opposed to mom. So we're really looking at the impact of what happens when dads reject this emotional attachment, when dads are not as involved. There are some significant issues there. And again, I think a lot of times in working with fathers, they really just aren't aware of these things. They really just they don't know the impact that they can have and that they do have on the life of their young child. Um, Knowing that kids feel loved by their father is better predicting of a young adult's sense of well-being, happiness of life, and just overall satisfaction. So again, just the level of impact we're getting to see. Some more things. Education, they learn more, perform better in school, exhibit healthier behavior. Their active involvement can have a lasting and positive impact. The presence of a responsible father, again, improves academic performance, reduces disciplinary problems. Um, Preschoolers have stronger verbal skills. They have an increase in curiosity, problem-solving capacity. They're more explorative and confident in their ability to solve problems. Um, and when non-custodial fathers, again, are involved, children are more likely to get A's at all grade levels. And so, again, the reason for all of this research information is really looking at all the opportunities we may have in working with our families to enlighten fathers. All right, regardless of the capacity or where things can happen and occur, we can really speak to our fathers. This is why it's important. It's about your child. It's about the impact that you have on your child's life, on your children's life. A lot of times with adults and with parenting, we can begin to kind of take score and check boxes. Who's better at this? Who does that? Well, sometimes the baby may go to him more, sometimes the baby may go to her more, and we begin to focus on those things. And so, again, the rationale behind the vast majority of this information is just so really allowing us the opportunity to speak to our fathers in a capacity of different ways, just on how their level of involvement can impact their children. And oftentimes, that's one of the keys to really enlightening fathers and engaging them in the process is that understanding, look, you have an impact on your child's life. It's not about the adults telling you what to do, what you should be doing, what you need to be doing, but are you aware that your presence, your involvement, your participation has these benefits on your child and on your children? So some of the big picture and practices in regards to working with fathers. One of the ones that we know is supportive, but we can't always control is obviously staffing. When we're talking about working with men, it's good to have men working in those programs, men being able to talk to men, we know to be very supportive. Just like anything else, when you're engaging with someone or when you're building a relationship, it's often easier when you're similar to the person you're dealing with. And so staffing, if can be managed in any sort of way, is supportive to working with fathers. Again, images. What are the images of the parenting that we have around our offices, around on our literature, on things of this nature? What are we showing fathers? Again, just like anything else, commercials, things of this nature. It's good and it's comforting and it's engaging to see images of similarity. People who look like me, people who may talk like me, people who may have like desires, like goals for their children as I might have. So the images that we have are also supportive in that. The literature that we give to our families about parenting in general, about fathers, does it speak to fathers? Is it more just general parenting? Does it speak to dad's involvement, dad's father's role? What type of language is used? Again, all of these things are impactful in regards to working with fathers and working with men who are involved in the lives of their children. And again, the language we use, how are we talking to fathers? And when we talk to fathers, are we talking to them or are we talking to the mom through them? And an example is oftentimes when we go to school, I went to my kids' school years ago, at my kids' preschool, and I knew the office staff very well. I coached some of their kids, so it wasn't personal. But even then, the office manager, she told me, she was like, "Oh, and make sure you tell your wife X, Y, and Z." And so things like that. Now I knew not to take it personal. It wasn't personal in any way, but that's just an example of, if that was someone else, they may have taken it as like, oh, then my wife needs to do that. This is my wife's responsibility. So even some of the language that we use, we just need to be mindful of and just be inclusive and just understand the potential impact it can have. Because again, as the perception, fathers often feel as if they aren't, that's not their job, that's not their role. So if our language supports that, whether it's intentional or not, that can further support and be a barrier to a father role and to a father's involvement. Um, Applicable practices, things that we can, if some of the other things on the previous slide may not be may not be in our control. We can't do a whole lot about. But applicably, we can look at that we use purposeful, goal-oriented communication, and that is what oftentimes fathers relate uh, better to things that are more structured and more rigid. And so the language we use, this is what is the service or the program that we're talking about. What does the father need to know? What should the father know? And some of the things that we talked about in the previous slides, really can speak to that, right? This is why you need to be involved. This is why it's important to the father. This is why it's important to your family. This is what this is about. Oftentimes, when there's service involvement, it can seem as if we're just kind of checking the boxes, just kind of moving through. Okay, what is this we have to do? What is this we have to get done? But really explaining this is why it's important. This is why it's significant. And what's the outcome of this? What's this is if you do this, this is what we expect to happen. If you participate in this, this is what we expect to happen. And so oftentimes this can really be supportive, because fathers will often say, I don't know what this is for. I don't know what this is about. They just want me to come to this. They just want me to go to that. They just want me to take this class. But there's really not an understanding or perspective of why they should be there, why it's important, and what's expected from their attendance, what's expected from their participation. And so again, the previous slides was really speaking to that. Engaging in your child's life, being involved in your child's life in this way, well, these are some of the outcomes: better academics, better emotional, better socialization, all of these things. And so I think the more the fathers are connected to that, the more the fathers understand that, I think that will be very supportive. Um, and in terms of best practices, unfortunately, a lot of times, we want, if you go these steps, we want sort of an algorithm to to kind of deal with this, and there isn't one. And the idea is you yourself are the best practice. your sincerity, your self-awareness, and sincerity is the most important factor in engaging and enlightening our fathers. Just like anything else, we know when an invitation is sincere, right? We know if someone is inviting us out of politeness, out of just being, the right thing to do, out of a social norm, as opposed to someone who really wanting you to be involved in this. And fathers know that. We feel that. We know whether or not someone wants us to be involved or if they're just kind of asking us to be involved because that's what they're being told to do. And so a lot oftentimes the response mimics that, and it reflects that. One of the things that we also is important to ask is do we find fatherhood to be a luxury or a necessity? And I would say, culturally speaking, right now we view fatherhood as a luxury. So, oh, you got a dad involved? Oh, that's great. Oh, the dad came? Oh, that's great. We know that moms don't get that sort of appreciation because moms don't get an option. If you're a mom, you're expected to be there. You're expected to do these things. And so we really want to move to a place where fathers are held to the same standard. That having a father around, having a father involved, and when I say father, I'm also including father figure. Um, this needs to be a necessity for our children. This is something that has to be there, not something that if we get it, that's icing on the cake. This fatherhood, fathering, father figures, this needs to be as much part of the parenting process as motherhood, because we know moms don't get these sorts of social outs, right? It's all where the father's not around. Okay, well, we know how to deal with that. We want to move from a place of that and really holding fathers and men accountable because of the relationship and because of the impact that it has on their children. Again, why are we trying to engage this father? Why are we trying to enlighten this father, or are we just trying to engage this father for practical purposes? Do we believe his involvement is a benefit to his children, or do we believe it's just part of an overall protocol? And these are just things that we need to look at in relationship to how we are communicating with fathers, how we're communicating with families. And oftentimes, I've worked in other programs, wraparound as an example. Oftentimes, when working with the family, we basically don't involve the father through our action. It's not in word or it's not in deed. It's just our action. We only speak to mom. We only communicate with mom. And so, the father feels like, okay, well, am I even a part of this process? No one has talked to me. No one has informed me about anything. And so again, what do our interactions? What does our work show the father in trying to engage and enlighten him to participate in processes? And again, our own sincere answer reflections to these. And this is understanding we are our greatest tool. And working with men and working with fathers, we are the greatest tool. We are the best practice. How we communicate, how we respond, all of these things is the greatest way to engage and enlighten fathers in terms of working with them in services. Some of the resources, just quickly put, obviously Project Fatherhood is local. We work with men. We work with men and their children in a variety of ways. And Project Fatherhood as a overall really looks at the child. So we are about children here at Project Fatherhood. And based on the previous slides, we know that when men are involved in the lives of their children, children do better. And so that's why we work with men for that reason. But again, we hold fathers accountable. We make sure that they understand what their role is, why it's important, and ways in which that they can constantly be the fathers that they want to be. We know and believe every father wants to be a good father, wants to be a great father, wants to reach his goals as a father, and we all need some support in terms of reaching those goals. Fatherhood.gov, fatherhood.org, these two larger national websites often have bulletins and various sort of resources regarding fatherhood, and there's links on there to other websites that can give information that can support fathers in a variety of ways. But it's really about what the father is looking for in those moments, in those times, and again, what supports does the father have? And one of the things is supporting that network. And culturally, oftentimes men don't communicate around their children. Men will communicate around any number of other things, but really around their children, a lot of men aren't taught to do that. And so again, Project Father provides a space for that. Men getting together to really just talk about the focus is our children and in parenting them and dealing with them. So those are some resources there. If there's any more specific resources in terms of specific employment or things like that, I have some of those available as well. But just in regards to fatherhood and engaging our fathers and enlightening our fathers, these are some specific resources. Any sort of questions? I wanted to leave time for questions. Again, I wanted this to be more of a dialogue. Any thoughts or anything coming up for anyone?
Thank you, LeHenry. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone right now so we can have a discussion, but I do have a couple of questions already for you.
Sure.
Okay, so I've gone ahead and unmuted everyone. One of the questions is, what are some concrete ways to engage teen fathers who may not be as engaged in home visits?
I think when you're talking about teen fathers, I think the information around their education of their child and the emotional involvement of their child is critical, because I think when they're teens, often they can grasp onto that more quickly, and it's not as difficult to look at things from a broader perspective for them. So really breaking it down concretely and saying, look, you being involved, your baby's going to be ready for school. Your baby's going to reach their milestones in a much more substantial way. Your baby's just going to be your baby's just going to be healthier in each and every way. And I think that's very supportive for teen fathers, because that's something very concrete. It's something in the moment. It's something right now that they can really hold on to, and they can, they can see, as opposed to, this a broader perspective around what services can do for them and their child.
And a follow-up question to that is, how do you engage a mother who doesn't want the father involved?
That happens, unfortunately, more often than we would ever like. And one of the things, again, that we do is we really focus on the child. And we know moms love their children to death, just like dads do. And so we really say, well, coming to a place where you both understand that your relationship with each other is about ensuring better outcomes for your child. This is how this happens. And so again, focusing on the child, on the outcomes of children, has really helped that process, as opposed to looking at who's doing what from the adult perspective, but focusing on the outcomes of the child has really helped the co-parenting that I've seen.
Okay, and sorry, a couple more questions here.
Sure.
How do you engage a father who they themselves have either had contact with DCFS already, who are maybe a little bit skeptical of, let's say, home visits, even though we are not a mandatory type of home visit? Or how do you engage fathers who they themselves have been victims of the system, or victims that have gone into the system, have had some kind of assault, or were in foster care themselves as children?
Obviously, building that trust and rapport in all aspects of the work that you do. So even outside of engaging the father piece, anytime we contact, this father, or we say we're going to contact the father, just really being consistent around that. It's just building that trust and rapport. So that way it's there. So when we do speak to the specifics around informed consent or confidentiality, whatever that we're talking about, the fathers can feel safe or safer. Because if they know, when I say I'm coming, I'm coming. Or when I say I'm calling, I'm calling. When I say this or that is going to happen, it happens. Or if I say I don't know, or if I say no, all of these things. So building this trust and rapport is critical around those things. Showing empathy, speaking to those things. Oftentimes not bashing the system, but also not apologizing for the system in those ways can also help. Because oftentimes, again, men and fathers who have dealt with the system or who are in the system, they may already have what we call bankrupt trust. They may already have a certain level of hypersensitivity to it. So although we don't bash the system, we also, in those moments, we'll let the father vent and not necessarily advocate for the system, because then that automatically makes them feel like, okay, well, you're part of that. So letting them vent, and then again, getting back to, well, I'm here for your child and to make your children's outcomes better. And so through this process, and even going back to your previous question around the mother and the specific father, oftentimes I talk to moms about, okay, if for you and that the biological father for whatever reason aren't able to co-parent, and at this time, is there another father figure, and just the importance of a positive male role model, and oftentimes that can be supportive in those situations as well.
Great. And the other question was, could you speak a little bit more to the programs that CII has to engage fathers, and what do these programs look like, and how do we get potential clients into the programs?
Absolutely. So the main program here at Children's Institute around, working with fathers is Project Fatherhood. The referral process is as simple as, an email of a father's name, date of birth, and contact information. They don't have to be a biological father. Any man in the role of a father can come to Project Fatherhood. So we have older siblings, uncles, granddads, foster dads, stepdads, any man that's parenting a child or is in the role of a father to a child can come to Project Fatherhood. And so we work with our fathers weekly in a weekly group. Fathers can bring their children, and the children have a separate group. And we, that's on a weekly basis. We also have employment support for fathers through Chrysalis, and we have healthy relationship workshops. Those are every month, so the father can bring his partner, and they can work on some of the co-parenting and the communication skills. We have financial literacy, which is also a monthly workshop, and we meet fathers where they are in terms of their finances. So some fathers may want to talk about 401ks and CD accounts and things such as this, and stocks. Other fathers may want to need more support around balancing a checkbook. So wherever fathers are, we meet them in terms of the financial literacy component. And then anything else a father needs in terms of classes, we can refer fathers to, in terms of if they need other supports around, any type of classes. But the referral process is as simple as an email with the father's name, contact information, and date of birth, and just basically here's a father who's parenting children and who wants to strengthen his relationship with his child.
Great, thank you. I want to open it up to our attendees on the webinar. Does anybody have questions for LeHenry?
Yes, I have a question. From Northridge. How do you ensure those fathers that do not want to get involved and get out with the job, so they come home tired and that they're the ones out of work and they don't have time for things like this?
So I just want to repeat the question. I want to repeat the question just in case. We're getting a lot of feedback. It sounds like the question was, how do you engage a father who comes home tired and doesn't necessarily see the need for this or doesn't want to get involved?
Yes, and again, that goes back to the father's role and perception of what he feels is most important. And so, but to answer his question specifically, I think it goes back to the outcomes. Understanding that yes, he does need to work and he's tired and he's doing all of these other things, but asking him, in what ways does he want his child's outcome to improve? And when we're looking at services, our question also becomes, how flexible in any way are there services to meet the needs of a father or to support father involvement? One of the things that I did when I was supervising working with wraparound was I had the father write down his concerns and write down things that he would want us to talk about at the team meetings he wasn't able to attend. And then that way, what we would do is we would address them in the CFT meeting, and then we would get that back to him also in writing. And so he was still engaged and involved in the process, although he couldn't physically be there. And so he felt that his concerns and his voice was still heard. So if the father is unable to physically be involved, if there's another way for, if there's written communication, phone contact, things of this nature. So that's been supportive in the past in terms of just that logistical piece. But in terms of a father not feeling like this is important, I think, again, that's where we talk about the enlightenment. we need to enlighten our fathers into what the impact that they're having. Because I've never met any parent, mother or father, if you told them, hey, your involvement is going to equal this, that they would say, well, yeah, it's not that important to me. I think fathers really just don't understand how critical their involvement is.
Thank you.
Thank you, LeHenry. We have another question in the chat box. Are there any specific Project Fatherhood meetings in the Antelope Valley area? Are there available resources for this project in this area? So this would be Lancaster, Palmdale, Antelope Valley area.
I think the answer currently is no, but I can get specific in terms of agencies that are trying to do some fatherhood work. We've trained several agencies in that area, but unfortunately, due to funding, they just weren't able to sustain the programs themselves. But I can research and get to Charlene some programs or agencies that are doing work in that area.
Great, thank you, LeHenry.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions? Either if you want to type them up, we can read them out loud for you, or other questions from the audience?
Also, any comments? Was the information helpful? Was it practical? I wanted to make it something that people could really take away and kind of use. So any thoughts and feedback around that? Because like I said, I didn't want it to be just something you just heard, but I did want it to be something that people would think about and actually be able to use.
Hey, this is Steve at LA Best Babies Network. Just a quick follow-up on your referral by email. I don't know if you mentioned it, but could you provide the exact email address that PCs would use to refer dads?
I can. My email is actually on the next slide.
That's your email address?
Oh, so you can just email directly to me. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I was also wondering, kind of on that note of referrals, if all the programs could get Project Fatherhood flyers to distribute, or some kind of a brochure or flyer to refer dads.
Sure. What I can do, I don't know if Charlene has everyone's email, but I can email her all of that, and she can blast it to whomever would like, or you can email me directly and ask any additional, if you want, if you want flyers or any other contact information, you can email me directly, and I can send that to you as well.
LeHenry, why don't you go ahead and send me the flyer and brochure you have, and we'll be sure to send it out with the notes of this call to everyone.
Will do.
Great. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Thank you, Steve.
Other questions or thoughts that we may have? I'm just wondering from the audience, from the group, what have been some successful or some challenging situations in terms of engaging fathers? What has worked and what hasn't worked for you?
Hi, this is Anais from Welcome Baby. I'm sorry, from Citrus Valley. Something that has worked for us is that if I see the father maybe just hanging like in the ditch or something, I try to ask them if they want to participate, and I explain a little bit about the importance of the fathers being being there for the family and for the child development on the baby's brain.
Great, thank you. Any strategies that haven't worked?
Hello, this is Claudia. I just want to comment on, I just want to say thank you to LeHenry for the presentation. It's always very important to hear the importance of fatherhood involvement and the missing piece for us. I think the biggest challenge, as everyone knows, is that, well, for us at MCHA, is that fathers are really never present, because home visiting does happen during the hours that most male providers are working. and
Right.
they do work very long hours. A lot of our families are day laborers, so they leave at 5 and come back around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So this is a challenge. Is how do we do this? And a lot of the times we don't visit enough to really tap into like all the whole dynamic of the family and what it looks like. So I think, I'm trying to figure out how we can incorporate this topic and how to do a better job at it. And just what came up for me was actually leaving a flyer or putting it in the parent kit that we give, which talks about development, which we talk about during multiple engagements, but it's really about leaving something for the fathers to reference so that they know. I think having some very basic facts and what they can do if they want to participate, because if I have to give you a number, I probably see one father in a month, and
Right.
I've already seen like maybe 30 families. So it's material is helpful. I think it can be costly, but I don't have any other ideas. I'm trying to figure out how else you can do this.
Yeah, and I think again, if just leaving something saying, specifically to dad, whatever your program is involved in, what are 3 things, asking the dad, what are 3 things that you would want to see, or what are a couple of things what are questions that you have, and sometimes that direct communication to the dad is helpful, even if it's not in person. So the dad feels like, oh, this program, this service is speaking to me. And it's because oftentimes when we're in families, we feel as if it's for the family, either one can participate or either one can kind of take the lead on it, right? But if it's specifically for dad to dad, then it's kind of his that he owns, and so it's his responsibility to respond to it, whether in person or otherwise, if that makes sense. And so even to your point around, we even at Project Fatherhood, we added a class on the weekends. We added a group on the weekends, on Saturday mornings, because when fathers are working and things like this, they're not always able to make it to our weekday groups, even though our weekday groups are in the evenings. So addressing the work schedules logistically, but even when that's not possible, even something to, and even if it's handwritten by that specific worker who goes out, right? Like, hey, if with the dad's name on it, I met with your partner, and what are some of the things that you want to contribute? What are some of the things that you want to say, or what are some of the things that you're concerned about? Whatever capacity you're working with the family in. And again, I think that can be supportive because it speaks directly to the father. So it's not something that the family has to answer, because a lot of times, we'll give families questionnaires, and then mom just may do it. She'll just kind of do it. But really something speaking to dad specifically that gives him some responsibility and ownership that he has to answer.
LeHenry, I'm curious, what are some of the questions specifically that you would ask a father?
In regards to what in
terms of engaging them?
I really look at, for me, why they're in that specific situation. So what that program is involved with, and really just asking the father, what do you want to see from your child? What goals do you have for your child? And really letting the father kind of speak to me around those things, and then supporting those responses through the program. Well, we can help your child reach this milestone, or we can help your child be better in these areas by your involvement in X, Y, and Z. And so really letting the father's goals, what the father has for his child or children, guide my engagement process. Because sometimes some of the services or some of the things that we speak to a father about, right or wrongfully so, that father may not even be concerned about. We might think the father needs to be concerned about these things, but he might not be. And so oftentimes telling the father what we think they should be working on or what they need to be doing often isn't as supportive, because that's not what they're concerned about. So really allowing the father to tell me what he's concerned about, and I really let the father guide my engagement, because now I know what to engage the father around.
Great, thanks so much, LeHenry. Does anybody have any other? Okay, well, please join me in giving a big virtual round of applause to LeHenry. LeHenry, I really appreciate you joining us today and providing us your presentation. I'll be sure to send out the presentation along with your contact information and brochure to everyone on this call today. So with that, LeHenry, again, thank you so much.